Welcome in to another episode of DNVR.
You should start that over because I think I said fuck yeah right as you said welcome in.
Welcome in to another episode of DNVR Avalanche at the Rink podcast, hosted by Meghan Angley and Jesse Montano. Jesse, welcome back.
Thank you. I was going to say it was, I think we ended up missing 2. So I was very sad. This is the saddest part that I was like to be missing while I was away. So I'm happy that we're back doing this.
I am too. There's still plenty to talk about. We didn't have a written piece come out this week, but there was still just so much to talk about.
Yeah, I told Meghan it's my fault. I told Meghan I said I got back too late in the week. I don't have a week's worth of stuff to talk about, and any of the stuff I'm going to talk about, I'm sure would be stepping on your toes. So we'll have the written piece back next week. But yeah, with 10 games to go, there's enough for us to talk about to do a show.
Absolutely. The first part I wanted to start out with was Jared Bednar's contract extension.
Yeah.
As head coach.
Yep.
7th season as head coach, 3rd longest tenured in the NHL, winningest coach in franchise history. We've talked to when he hit the winningest coach in franchise history marker point this year. We kind of talked about the reasons why he is such a great leader for this team. But I felt like there was still more to talk about here, in part because of the challenges he faces. Getting to a Stanley Cup is one challenge by itself, but going back-to-back is another challenge entirely, and he is fielding this sort of newly. This is his first time as a coach navigating that alongside his team. I think it's presented a lot of unique challenges alongside the injuries that they've also dealt with this season that are going to make this really interesting because he's already earned this contract extension. But when talking to him around the deadline, he talked about the ways in which this team is going to remain in a competitive window beyond just this year. Yep. And that's what I think is special about this contract extension, is that he's had a hand in how successful the team has been through this point, and he gets to continue to have a hand in their level of compete for a few years to come now.
So this is twice now that Jared Bednar has gotten a contract extension well ahead of him needing one. He still had another season after this one on his current contract. So this deal that he just signed that will make him one of the highest paid coaches in the NHL doesn't kick in till after next year. The Avs handled his last contract extension the same way last season when they extended him. I believe we were actually on the road in Seattle when they did that. But to the point that you were just making, Meghan, about the hand that he's had in getting the team to this point and him getting to continue that, the way that they've done these contract extensions, I think, is so interesting, and it tells you so much about the belief that they have in Jared Bednar, regardless of what's happening, in the present moment. Obviously, they just won the Stanley Cup. So I think it was safe to assume that everyone felt like he would probably get a contract extension. But you go back to last year, and they're coming off of the disappointment against Vegas, probably their most disappointing playoff loss. There was a lot of question marks around, are they going to fire Jared Bednar after the season, before last season even started? Has he maybe lost the room? The fact that they just completely fell apart against Vegas. Not only did they not do that, but they came out in the early goings of the season and gave him an extension. And that was the first real public vote of confidence of, not only are we not going to move on from him, but we don't even want to risk him getting to the end of this deal and him potentially getting more money somewhere else. We believe in him. He's a part of the fabric that makes up this organization. Then obviously they go on and have the season they did last year. He becomes the winningest coach in franchise history. They win the Stanley Cup. I know those happened in separate seasons, but since then. And then they have they could have waited till next year, halfway through next year, and no one would have batted an eye. But they said, this is how important Jared Bednar is to what we're doing and to what we've built and what we will continue to build. Is that I think that's the 4th ambulance that's gone by in the last 2 shows that we've done, going back to last night. But saying we believe in him so wholeheartedly, we don't even need to see what happens next year. We know that he is the foundation that this culture is built on and this group stands on, and he's here. Like, he's here going forward. And like you said, I think it just mostly speaks to the impact he's had on building this culture from nothing, from a team that was abandoned 2 weeks before training camp, worst season in modern NHL history, and he's built it up to this point. And to me, this contract extension is a reflection of, I don't necessarily want to use the word gratitude, that seems a little dramatic, but just the level of appreciation that management and ownership has for the hand that he's played in getting them to this point. It's not just they've drafted well and have great players. It's not just that, Darcy Kemper had a great season last year and Alexander Georgiev and all those things matter. But this contract extension says it all starts with Jared Bednar, and we understand that.
To me, I put the most pressure on myself, and I think our team puts pressure on ourselves internally at all times to try and be at our best. I think it's good. It helps keep you sharp. But there was that run, I think it was the year we played Calgary, where we had to go to the run at the end of the year. Would have been the year after we lost to Nashville, the second time getting in the playoffs, and we had sort of a bad, third quarter to the season. And I felt like our team was in a position to take a step forward, and we just weren't doing it. And then we ended up going on the run and beating Calgary. So that season, to me was a step forward and a successful season, even though there was some heartbreak losing to San Jose. That was one. And then I'd say the biggest one, the next year playoffs, kind of got some bad luck, in my opinion, still even looking back on it. We were in a position to advance to the conference finals, lost to Dallas, losing the goaltenders, EJ, Landy. We just kind of got beat up there a little bit and couldn't sustain it. But the year we lost to Vegas was heartbreaking, because that's year 3 where we've had a good team. One we're building, one we get injuries, and then this one we were healthy and ready to go pretty much, and just didn't play up to our capabilities. So looking back on that one, that would have been an easy time for management to make a change, right? But they stuck with us, and I do think, looking back on it, that helped drive our team last year. If we go on or lose the next round or whatever it is, if you play well and lose, you're close. But I do think that helped drive our staff, our team, just to keep pushing the bar forward and getting really dialed into the details going into the playoffs last year, knowing what could cost us, and really working to try and correct things and sort of predict the future before we even got to the playoffs last year.
Around the deadline, you talked about how competitive this team is beyond just this season. How exciting is it to continue to have a hand in that moving forward? Yeah,
I mean that's what excites me the most. The core group of players that we have here, all of them really, but because I think you've seen when players come in and out of here, they all kind of follow our leadership in our room. Landy, Mac, Mikko, Kale, Taser, guys that are just, I think, elite competitors along with their skill set. So we've got this great core to build around, and we mix and match and get new players here and there, but that core drives our team, and that core is going to be together for a while. And so to be part of that group and help try and set the sort of discipline factor for the team and give us a good plan and get us prepared, I like our chances on a nightly basis. And I think we're sort of showing that now, as we get more competitive and more determined, and as the season goes on, we're having more success with a lineup that's still beat up and missing key players.
It's a very specific clip, and it relates to building around this core moving forward too. Because I think what we're going to pin as an important part in Jared Bednar's story is the heartbreak of the Vegas exit specifically. Because they had experienced heartbreak before that, but that felt like what was maybe the final nail in the coffin, because he points to that as what fueled last year's team to be hungry enough to chase the Stanley Cup, was the heartbreak of the Vegas exit. And specifically, he also points to that personally as a time where he didn't use the word doubt, but he said that management might have opted to move on from him after that point. and they didn't. And that meant a lot to him too. You know, it fueled him as a coach into that next season where they obviously do get the Stanley Cup. And I think what's been interesting in the storyline for this season is they're not coming off the heels of a heartbreak or an exit. They're trying to do this again. And the hunger, it's different. They're not hungry for their first Stanley Cup. And so what's going to really test them, and already has so much this season, and you sort of asked Jared Bednar about this too, the grind of this season, 82 games, that boy sure feels like a lot. And it's the demand, it's the same demand, but you have to be mentally tougher to go back at it for a second time. And I think that's where this group is going to be especially tested. And it's not just Bednar who is going to be at the helm there. That's going to be a lot of members of this group presently that are being tested mentally in a way that I think is new to them, new to everyone.
Well, and again, when you look at the contract extension relative to what you're talking about, we know that the chat, like, you know, what they're saying internally, and Joe Sakic knows because he's been through this, right? He's been through multiple title defense seasons. What they're saying is we know the challenges are changing. To your point, Meghan, we're no longer chasing our first one. Now we're trying to do what we stopped Tampa from doing last year. We're trying to start getting there every year, late runs every year, adding banners, you know, the hope and the goal with this core, and we've talked about it several times, you know, over the last 9 to 12 months, is like the hope with this core is that it's not just the one last year, that it's at least one more. And like, let's be honest here, you really want one more after that, right? To feel like this outstanding group that you've got that all lines up age-wise and all that stuff, you know, Landeskog, Rantanen, McKinnon, Makar, all of that stuff. You hope you can add a few. And what they're saying is, we think Jared Bednar is best qualified to help this group manage the focal change, the way that we have to change our approach, our preparation, the way that we deal with an 82-game season. It's like you said, we're learning this season, it's a grind. They're having to mentally grind through this season in a different way than they had to last year. And we feel that Jared Bednar is the most qualified and best person to help this franchise shift that focus from chasing this group's first cup, not the organization's first cup, obviously, but chasing a first cup to trying to do it again and then trying to hold on as long as you possibly can. You look at one of the, I believe it's 2 coaches that are longer tenured than him, and one of them is John Cooper, and it's the same thing. We believe in him as a leader, and that's something that players have talked to me about this year. Jared Bednar is more of a leader than he is the coach. That he feels kind of like one of the boys in the room, and yeah, he's the guy drawing up the X's and O's, but that, again, I've had several guys tell me this year, and it's specifically guys who have played for, you know, lots of other coaches. He feels more like a leader than just your coach. And I think that is what you are seeing. Every hockey team, every sports team, every company in corporate America are looking for people like that. We need leaders. We don't need bosses. We need leaders. And that's what Jared Bednar is. And I think the coaches that you're seeing getting these types of extensions early, big money, teams saying we recognize what we have and we want to hold on to them. Like I said, John Cooper, Jared Bednar, who I know Jared Bednar thinks very highly of. John Cooper, you know, takes a lot of pointers from him. But again, like I said, they're saying we think you can lead us through different waters. You're not just some guy who's here drawing up the plays. And I think when we talk to Jared Bednar, it's very easy to understand why when you listen to him speak and stuff. But that's why I wasn't at all surprised to see the extension come for the dollar amount, the term, and when it did. Like I said, a full year and a half early before the Avs needed to make any of these decisions.
I think that third in the third longest tenure conversation is Mike Sullivan, and he is someone that would also know a lot about what it takes. And there's a reason, too, that these coaches emerge, and it is a huge honor, a well-earned one, for Bednar's name to emerge among these coaches, because it does take something special to bring a group to that level, and it takes a special group too. That's not to be
Yeah.
understated in all of this.
Absolutely. And Jared would be the first one to say that too.
Absolutely. I think that's a huge part of it too, because in the absence of Gabriel Landeskog, this group has been tested in so many ways left and right, including the injuries, not having their captain, and trying to chase a Stanley Cup back-to-back. Like, we are now in a conversation where they're chasing down another division title.
Look, right. Okay. And look, I don't want to sound too Homer-ish here. I can understand why people think that this season, the regular season, feels disappointing relative to the last 2 regular seasons that the Avs had. President's Trophy ran away with the Western Conference in back-to-back years, right? So I get it. It's not this like outright dominating season. But Meghan, if I told you game 1 of the season, at game 72, 10 games to go, the Avs will be 1 point out of the Central Division lead. One, I think maybe we would have been a little surprised if there was another team that close to the Avs. But I think I would be like, oh, all right, cool. Yeah, that sounds great. Then you give all of the context of the season, the injuries, the fact that we haven't seen Gabe Landeskog for a single game. Cale Makar's missed 3 or 4 separate stints. Darren Helm has 7 games played to his name. You've been without Josh Manson for a long stretch now. You were without Val Nichushkin for long stretches for the first half. The fact that we are here, 10 games to go, and they're 1 point out of the Central Division lead with a game in hand, I don't know if we've quite given enough credit to this group. And again, to kind of keep it tied in, Jared Bednar and the coaching staff as well, they have done such an amazing job. And you can go back to the 48-point year because players started talking about it then, about a culture being built and expectations and holding each other accountable and, the cliche next man up. The team last year dealt with a lot of injuries. We just don't remember it because they rolled just every single night. It just didn't really matter. They got into the playoffs. They lost key contributors. They lost Sam Girard, Andre Burakovsky, and Nazem Kadri, sometimes all 3, but at different points, and they just didn't matter. This team has struggled a little bit more. The injuries have been a bit more significant. But, again, just another feather in Jared Bednar's cap, the way that he has gotten this group to a point where it doesn't really matter what happens. They hang around just always. And I think that's another testament to what he and the coaching staff and management have built that, like you said, these great players play into. But, yeah, I don't know if we've, with 10 games to go, I don't know if we've stopped and appreciated the fact that they're even here.
I think, too, it lends itself to some other conversations we'll get into, like the return of Erik Johnson, because they are counting on Erik Johnson returning to this defensive group. They're counting on Josh Manson also eventually returning their necessary pieces. But before I move on from the injury component, because I think it's going to also be something we look back on as a necessary part of the Avs story, and it's because of adversity. Mm-hmm. Because of the heartbreak of the Vegas series fueling them for a Stanley Cup, we're looking to, what fuels them this year? And I think battling through this type of adversity the way that they have through this season was really necessary for them. Now, if I had a chance to go back and rewrite it, the adversity might have looked different. I don't know that I would have asked that it come about through so many injuries.
Right.
That is not something I would wish upon this team. But I do think that they needed to be tested this season because it keeps them accountable.
Yeah. A lot of people view this season through a lens of loss. The loss of Landeskog, not having Kadri and Burakovsky return, but looking at some of the new additions in Georgiev and Rodriguez, are there parts of the newness that are an understated positive or strength of this group?
Oh yeah, I think there's a lot. You got to remember adding guys like Lehkonen that have now become part of our core at the deadline last year. I know they were part of the most important time of the year, but we didn't have them to start last season. So losing guys is part of the game when it's just a handful of guys. I think we've had more than our fair share, but the addition of Georgiev, what he's been able to do in his first year here, I think he started better than any of the previous goalies that we brought in. I think we're seeing him play large stretches of hockey, the most he's ever played in this season, and play real well for us. So I think there's positive additions, not just to like this year's team for this year, but that we can move forward with, So, and again, the most important, you're always going to get evaluated for what you do at the most important time of the year. So this team is still going to write its own story one way or the other.
Given the position you're in currently in the standings, would you feel that the adversity that the team has faced this season has been handled pretty well? We can talk about playoff exits being adversity, right? But that's the end of the season; it's over.
Yeah, that's how you would respond the next season, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I would say yes. Yeah, I'm pretty. I don't mind going through ups and downs in a season. It's all about your response to adversity, the situations that you're in, whether you put yourself in them or it's things out of your control. It's all about your response, and that adversity will make you stronger if you handle it the right way, and it can drive the best out of people, and it can force other people to struggle. But for the most part, I think our team's handled it pretty well. We've gone through some inconsistencies for sure, but to be able to respond like we did just here in the recent past prior to these 5 games, that was the best I'd seen our team play all season long, for as long as stretches as I've seen them play all season long. So, and again, that came from a little bit of desperation and urgency. So I believe this team has it in them. I think they believe. We just got to dig in and get back to that point.
With Lars, you said you want to trust his instincts. Heading out on the East Coast, maybe playing a bunch of teams he might be more familiar with, do you think that could potentially help him?
I think it's more about his new environment. So it can be a lot to handle, moving away from the family. There's things going on within the hockey side of it, and then personal life too as well. So it can take guys. Some guys are used to bouncing around, new team every year, and it's not a big deal. Their personality, whatever. I think there's a lot of things in play there. I just think it's about getting comfortable and in his surroundings, his line mates, his teammates, how we operate, and I'm positively thinking that he's still got more to give us here yet too.
Yeah. You guys got more?
We've heard from teams guys like Patrick Sharp, teams who have gone deep in the playoffs, had multiple cup runs, about the struggle of getting up for regular season games. It's obviously the stretch, so it's a little more important now, but have you felt at all maybe some of the ups and downs and consistency are a result of that prolonged period of hockey without the finality of playing in the playoffs?
No question. Yeah, no question. Yeah, I've touched on that, even about the start of our season. It's long. You look at it as a whole, and it can be intimidating again, how are you going to get to that level of performance, competitiveness, determination, hunger, whatever adjective you want to use for this length of the season. It's difficult. Yeah, it's a mental grind. Yeah. I don't think it's a different demand. I think it's the exact same demand. It's just harder to get there mentally. That's the truth of it. You have to be mentally stronger to go back at it again than you probably were the first time. Okay? I think the first time that the hunger has been manifesting in our team for years because of the losses, and that we just kept we feel like our team got better and better and better the hungrier that we got, and that so when it comes to the drive that you need to do it again, I think it's more difficult, which is why I'm so impressed with teams that can do it. Now, on top of that, it's a significantly different team, it is, and so the guys that went through it last year, okay, that I believe that we can get there still. I think we have the belief that we can get there, but we have to get there. The sooner the better, right? And we're not there yet. Okay, so I like the way we responded with the desperation the last month, and I think that now we got to go do it again, and then we're gonna have to carry it into the playoffs. It's probably not going to be perfect here to the end of the season either. And for some of the new guys, some of them have never been there. and we're going to need to get them there as well. Like, there's another level. Like, they haven't gone through the heartbreak with their team for the last 5 years. So it's a different group. It's not the same group as last year. So, yeah, I think it all comes into play.
So wrapping it up on the adversity front, at least, I do think it's been a difficult and frustrating part of this season, especially because of the uncertainty surrounding players' timelines and the nature of their injuries. This is an NHL-wide frustration, too, that I think people are experiencing no matter their organization. But they're here. 10 games to go. Yeah. They have a chance at the division title yet again, and I think it's going to be an important part in their story.
I think it's pretty standard practice, I would say, for most guys to be playing through portions of the season or large portions of the season sometimes and not be feeling their best, So that's why, people can be critical of a player at certain times, and we're just happy to have them in the lineup contributing at sometimes 75-80% of what they can do. But it's, you almost come to expect it as a player in this league that you're not going to feel 100% all the time, and if you are, that's really good. And I think it's why players take care of themselves so well now and are so dedicated to their craft, because the better they play, or the better they feel, the better they're going to play. But sometimes it's out of their control, and you just get injuries, and sometimes some injuries are easy to rehab during the season and feel better quickly, and other ones, if you're going to stay on the ice and keep playing, then they're going to nag you for a while. Which is exactly, an example of that is Cale. We didn't want that to happen. We didn't want it to linger. Giving him days off like this and having him get back in the lineup after a couple of games, I think is the best course of action sometimes.
You mentioned. Well, and like you said, there has to be something that the group, and again, this isn't specific to the Avalanche. I mean, this is any championship team in any league. There has to be something that you can rally around, right? That's why for 20 years, every time the Avs traded for a player that was over 30, everybody was like, oh, maybe he can be their Ray Bourque, right? Because that was what everyone kind of latched onto, is that was what everyone remembered from that 01 team. They all rallied around that. But when you go through every cup champ, there always is something that the group that's their driving force, right? And like you said, last year it was they had to, I don't want to say like prove everyone wrong, but it was the second round thing. As much as they downplayed it, as soon as they got through, Nathan McKinnon was like, yeah, no, it was driving us absolutely insane. Like, we wanted to get through the second round. And then it was, well, now we're through the second round. We can't stop now. Like, we can't lose now. You know what I mean? And I remember even Cale Makar talking about the Josh Manson save in Game 6, and that on the bench, that was kind of like their rally moment in that game. It was like, we wasted Nate's unbelievable goal at the end of Game 5. We are not wasting that play. Like, we're not going to do it. And there's just, again, it was that prove everyone wrong mentality that kind of pushed them. And you worry when you go through, like, okay, well, can you keep that kind of underdog mentality? And to your point, yes, it's unfortunate that it came about through like brutal injury luck in ways that like have really disrupted the season. But you almost kind of hope that like internally, and I think about it a little bit with the way that Nate has dialed it up here at the back half of this season, because he, I think, has been the most like kind of outwardly spoken of like, we're not worried. Like, kind of throwing it back on us, the media. Like, you guys are the ones talking about being worried. Like, we're good. We know we're good. It's a long season. And it almost kind of feels like he's got a little bit of that, like, cool, you guys want to sit here and nitpick every last thing that I do? I'm just going to go ball out for 2 months then. Nitpick that. And, like, it really does feel like there is a little bit of that. Like, I've gotten that feel from Devon Taves as well, of where it's like, cool, you guys think that we don't have it anymore? Awesome. And to your point, like, that maybe they needed something like that for this year to be able to push back. And now that we're getting to the end of the season, we're into the playoffs. We've been telling you guys all year, we're fine. We're going to go show you just how fine we are. And it's going to be interesting.
It's funny that you mentioned that about McKinnon, because I think there is something a little ramped up in him at the moment. RF talked to him the other day at practice, and he was explaining a little bit of the interview, and it was good. He's a little edgy right now and providing good answers. He spoke really highly of Val. I don't know if RF's put anything out on that yet, but it sounded like a good tidbit. But he's edgy at the moment, and I don't think, we talk about players that are a reflection of the state of the team, and they reflect the team in different ways.
Yep.
And McKinnon is absolutely a part in that. And I think what he's done well is reflecting the lack of panic. Even through the frustrating moments, he's been an advocate for this team. That's why he's been in losses. He has been an advocate for them is maybe the best way to put that. And I think there's a reason for that. And there's someone quite battle tested, and it's Erik Johnson.
Yeah.
He's missed some time since February 11th. He returns, and he's already back up to 16:29 in his last game, time on ice. It's a far cry from a point in this season where they were running the Andreas Englund, Brad Hunt types, and they were being held to significantly lower minutes.
Yep.
And that's just a testament to, I think, we talk about culture, and around the deadline, character is discussed a lot, but a part that they make mention of is how well these players take care of themselves away from the ice.
Yep.
That's a part of the culture here in Colorado. Now, it's hard to talk about it because of all the injuries this season. I don't think some of these timelines that have been longer than expected, like Pavel Francouz literally right now, I don't think are a reflection of players not taking good care of themselves away from the ice. But anytime a player has returned as quickly as an Evan Rodriguez has, or in this case, Erik Johnson, I think there is something to be said for the regimen they each individually have to take care of themselves. And that is another piece in the accountability part that we talk about at length. And I think Erik Johnson is a big reflection of that. And this group is so grateful to have him back just ahead of this Stanley Cup playoff run.
Feel good. Responded real well and back early, so that always feels good. I wasn't sure initially if I'd be back before the playoffs started, so happy in that sense for sure and feel really good. So overall, really pleased. Team played great while I was out, so hoping a seamless transition back to the lineup.
What was I guess the moment I think it was blocking a shot, like did you think like, oh no, this could be pretty bad right away? Or
Yeah, I've had those injuries before, unfortunately, so I wasn't totally sure. But it kind of got worse as time passed, so I wasn't expecting that, but that's sometimes what happens when you're blocking a lot of shots.
Yeah. Jared said 8 to 10 weeks. I mean, I think we're about 6 weeks. Are you kind of surprised how quickly it healed?
Yeah, I was doing everything I could off the ice to make sure I got back early in the early phases of the injury, and like you said, 8 to 10. I wasn't sure how long it was going to be, but I got on the ice after 3 weeks and it felt really good, and just got better from there. So I feel great and ready to go.
It's funny because this hasn't been a great season for Erik Johnson individually. If you're just looking at his on ice results and things like that, when you take a step back and give that some context, which you and I talk about all the time, things have context, and you see that, to your point and what we've been talking about with the injuries, Erik Johnson's been asked to play much further up in the lineup than where he's at this point in his career. That is not a knock on Erik Johnson. He's a third pairing defenseman on this Avalanche team. That he's a huge upgrade over some of the guys they've had on that third pair throughout the year. He's still a bona fide NHL defender, but he's a third pairing guy now. Him, like you said, coming back in, taking, 16-29? First couple games back, that's right where the Avs want him. That's right where the Avs want him in terms of usage. That's killing penalties. That's maybe some defensive zone starts late in the game. That's what you want him. And when he's playing in that role, he is so valuable to them for what you mentioned, the presence that he brings off the rink. You could tell guys we were talking to today, they were excited to have him back around, have him back on the ice. I think he's a little bit got that Gabe Landeskog effect a little, where it's just him being around is just good for the group. Longest tenured Av, and there's a lot of the younger guys that really look to him, for advice or just going through it. You know, he's a guy we talked a lot about with Cale Makar last year, Bowen Byram last year, because Eric Johnson has been through that. The injuries that seem like it's just never going to end. And am I going to be able to get back from this? I mean, shit, he almost retired before last season because he didn't know how if he was going to be able to get back. So he's just so valuable to the locker room. And then when you have him appropriately cast on your third pairing, I mean, even as currently constructed, let alone when they get Josh Manson back, Jack Johnson, Eric Johnson, I don't know. I think you put that up against most third pairings in the league. And so just having him back, I think it just means so much for this group. On, off, doesn't matter. I think having Eric Johnson back around this time of year is huge.
I asked Jack Johnson when Eric Johnson, that's a lot of Johnsons,
yeah,
returned as a full participant in practice but had not yet been officially confirmed as coming back. I asked him what it was like having him on the ice, and he pointed immediately to the personality in the room, the presence that he brings, and how good it is to have him back around. And I think that is also another part that shouldn't be understated, and a big reason why someone like Jack Johnson is even back here too is the cohesion that he brings to this group that established themselves last year. I think how well these players get along with each other behind closed doors, away from the rink, is really important in what they're able to do together on the ice.
So much of the playoffs, and really you hear so much about this with just hockey in general, but especially to go on a long playoff run, like you have to be willing to sacrifice a lot for the guys next to you. And I think it can maybe sometimes be overstated. But I fully agree with you, Megan. Like, you have to want to, go to battle with the guys next to you. And you have to want to, Eric Johnson, you have to want to lay down in front of a shot again after just breaking your ankle because you want to do it for the guys that are next to you. I think about Andrew Cogliano last year. Broke his hand. The series ended. His hand was still very broken. And that first game back, he's laying in front of every puck out at the blue line. And it's like, those are the type of guys you want. Like, and I think Jack Johnson, Eric Johnson, I think those players are very, I think they represent that. And just their presence, the fact that the Avs didn't go out. And again, now we know Eric Johnson's back with more than 10 games left in the season. That's why they didn't add another defender. But there sounds like there was probably never even a question. Like, nope, we think Eric's coming back, and we think he's the most valuable ad that we could have this time of year because of how we already know he fits in the room, all that stuff. And it's the same thing with Jack. That's why they brought him back. Were there probably better defensive options out there on the trade market? Yeah, probably. But they knew how Jack Johnson fit, and they knew that the minute he walked into that room, guys were going to be stoked.
I think that's all an important part of this story. Mm-hmm. We've touched on quite a few things. The other part is a huge absence, but has started returning to the rink, taking to the ice, really taking it slowly as well, and that's Gabriel Landeskog. I think you've been privy to watching him skate a little bit more. Just tell me what you're seeing.
So it's funny, Megan, because 90% of people on social media and stuff like that are constantly asking us, what's going on with Gabe? What's going on with Gabe? Can you find out? And now there's a new contingency of people that are popping up being like, stop asking about Gabe. We all know what's going on. So it's funny because both in like public perception and in like, there's reality. There's just so much information we have, information we don't have. Things are progressing, yet they're really kind of standing still. So to answer your question, genuinely, Megan, the way that I would put this was that first week he was back on the ice, I thought from Monday to Friday, there was a huge amount of progress. That Monday, I mean, it was, I'm on my skates and I'm just doing very light work. And then by Friday, he was cutting, making kind of hard turns, shooting the puck, passing back and forth. And now we're about a month later, and honestly, Megan, I haven't seen much progress from where he was at that first Friday.
I know you don't have a timeline still, but can you just kind of walk through where Gabe's at, like with the rehab process, or not just?
No idea.
Purely just day by day how he's feeling?
Yeah, I mean, he's just trying to move forward to get to a spot where he can play. Yeah.
Right, because
he's out I have no idea if it's a week, 2 weeks.
Right.
I mean, he's making progress, but I can't tell you. Not close enough yet.
Is there any sort of explanation from doctors or whatever it may be as
sure
to
there
why
is,
it's so
you'd have to ask them. You got their number.
Is there any worry with Gabe of this kind of stretching and, he just signed a long-term contract and being like a reoccurring issue, or is this just something that needs to get figured out now?
I can't answer that, really, to be honest with you. Like, I don't have all the medical news. I've gotten an explanation at one point of what's going on and what it's going to take to hopefully get him back and ready to play, and until that changes, I don't know. Yeah.
And when you look at Gabe Landeskog and his, potential return, is this something where you just kind of act as if you're not going to have this guy for the playoffs, and if he comes back, it's a luxury? Because usually,
I have to plan on. Yeah, exactly. I have to plan on the guys that I know are in, and right now, I know we're going to get Lehkonen back because of his finger. It's like EJ, give it time. It's going to heal. He'll be back. He'll be back on the ice sometime soon. He's putting a lot of work in the gym, and I'm just hopeful and trying to stay positive that we're going to get the other guys back.
I was thinking at first, wow, if he keeps progressing like this, you may be talking a week before the season ends, get in some regular season games. And it just feels like that progress has not stalled out, but I mean, it is just slowed to a crawl. He's taken 2 practices technically with the team in the last week-ish. Those to me seem like more of morale boosters for everyone because he's not really taking part in the drills. He's passing a lot of pucks. Like, he'll move up in the line and make a few passes to start the drill, and then then someone will kind of like jump in and like pinch run for him. We've asked Jared a few times now, and like we're trying to change the way that we're asking. I'll have you drop in a Jared Bednar here.
That's the weirdest shit we do.
And again, whether it's what is he doing, what's he progressing through, what's the time, there's just no information. And it's really sounding like they're at a point where, like, yeah, we have stuff that we're progressing through.
We don't have a timeline still,
but it all each day depends on how he did the previous day
process, or not just
no idea.
Purely just day by day how he's feeling.
And it's
he's just trying to move forward.
It's hard to gauge anything off of that right now because it's like, okay, most of these guys normally have, like, we'll be told, hey, they're going to be on the ice this day, they're going to take a rest day, and they'll be in the gym and on the ice, then in the gym, ice, then they'll be with the team, then they'll whatever. And there's always the caveat, that's the plan barring any setbacks.
Is there any
really, Megan, from everything that I can gather, it sounds like they are still at the point with Gabe where it's like, okay, well, did you feel good today? Do you feel like you'd want to do another on-ice day tomorrow? Great.
I can't answer
or,
that, really,
do you need it every other day? Whatever. It's just...
news.
There's no information
at one point of
yet.
What's going on.
He's skating, and so it's really hard to gauge right now. People keep asking me, "What do you think?"
Until that changes,
I was really confident for a long time that he'd be back.
Potential return, is this
I don't know anymore. I really don't.
When you say he'd be back, do you mean like at all this season?
Yeah. So I
have to
playoffs.
For the longest time, I really did. I said I think they'd like to get him in games, but I think the target is going to be round 1 game. That was how I felt all year. If we can get if we don't need the cap space, and we can stay cap compliant, if we can get him in the last game of the year just to get some puck touches,
putting a lot of work in the gym,
maybe send him on that game to Nashville and keep some other guys home.
Stay positive that we're going to get
I said maybe, yeah, that'd be nice. But I always kind of targeted round 1, game 1. And then as things moved a little bit slower, I said, okay, well, maybe tail end of round 1, targeting round 2. And now I'm just at the point, Meghan, where I really don't know. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where they like shut him down and say he's not coming back. But I mean, I do. I think at this point we'll have to get through the regular season into practices before round 1 to get an idea of if he's even an option. And I think that's really kind of the point that we're at now. I think it's end of the regular season. Let's see where they're at in practices. And then it's a round by round for Gabe. As they continue to go deeper, can he ramp up? Can he ramp up in practices ready for round 2? Okay, they make it through round 2. He didn't play. Where's he at practice-wise? Is he jumping in? Is he non-contact? Is he still just skating on his own? From where he was that first week, I'm really kind of in the same spot.
It's important too. He asked to be at those team practices, the ones where he's not quite a full participant by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. And it was by his request that he be there. And I think it's important for him to be around the group this time of year, because it doesn't take you or me talking about the value he brings, especially through his leadership to this group. But I did like that Jared Bednar addressed the value he brings to the team because of what he does differently in his approach to leadership. Because it's been an interesting question this year in the absence of Gabriel Landeskog, what voices have emerged. And the short answer is quite a few of them.
Yeah.
I asked Cale Makar about it, and he listed off several names that you would expect, like the Rantanen, McKinnon. He didn't mention himself. He is absolutely also one of those voices. But he also mentions Val Nichushkin, Andrew Cogliano, who you would expect in that conversation. Yep. And Bednar sort of talked about how this group has done a good job to stepping up in that way, but there is just something very special that Landeskog brings to the table that is really hard to replace.
A few more guys, go ahead.
Gabe's leadership that makes him special.
There's a million things, as you would guess. I mean, Gabe just has this presence and understanding and like this whole all-encompassing view of our team. It's like, you know, he's like another coach, you know. It's not just what he has to do to be successful. I think he's really clear on what he has to do. He's a real consistent player for us. So once you kind of get to that point in your career, you start broadening your horizon and how can you help others, and you know what's going on in the room, and is it, you know, good, bad, indifferent, and he's just, I mean, he's a phenomenal teammate and a phenomenal leader. So it's just, you know, it's a little bit of everything. You know, it's just his personality and his leadership qualities that, you know, any team would miss when they're not there.
I think midway through.
We could move on from that part of the conversation to look ahead then at the current State of the Union, what the Avs have to look forward to in the next 10 games in this race for the division title.
Yep. It's fun. I told you the other day, when the first day that I was back, I think we were leaving morning skate, and I mentioned to you, I was like, it's fun because like now these are the fun games. Like this has been a grind all year to get through, but like now we're down to 10 games. It's a tight race at the top of the Western Conference. I'm just going to pull this up just so I make sure I've got. So the Avs have one game in hand on both Dallas and Minnesota. That'll remain true after tonight. All three teams play. The Avs are 1 point back of the Wild. And after tonight, their next game is against Minnesota, and the game after that's against Dallas. This is a huge week. Huge week. This really could decide really kind of like where we're at. There's 2 weeks to go after this week. Still 7 games for the Avs coming out of Saturday when they play at home against Dallas. But really, with games in hand and things like that, we could start to get some clarity on, okay, this team's probably going to finish third. It's probably down to these two teams. The Avs make good use of their games in hand and can win both these games head to head. They're going to put themselves in a phenomenal position to win the Central Division again. But it's just going to be interesting because as much as I say that, we have seen at times this year, the Avs are a great example of that. Oh, they lose 3 in a row. Well, it looks like they're probably back. Nope, they just rattled off 5 straight wins and they're right back into it. So as much as you can do yourself favors this week, there's still 7 games after that, and a lot can change. But this, to me, does feel like we're going to start to get some clarity at the top of this division. Dallas seems like they're kind of hanging on. They've had a lot of things go their way this season. Seems like they're just kind of trying to get over the finish line here. Minnesota lost Kirill Kaprizov, and everyone kind of thought, ooh, is that going to put them into maybe wild card contention? And they just won't lose a game. And again, kind of like Dallas, all of them coming in spectacular fashion. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I still stand firm that regardless of where this ends up, I think the Avs are still the best team in the West. I just look around Dallas, Minnesota, even Vegas, Edmonton. They're just all really flawed teams. I think the West is just full of very flawed teams. LA, it's maybe the one team that stylistically I think you could say would be the most concerning if you're the Avs. But again, Korpisalo, it helps, but like they've had a hard time getting a save all year. It's going to be a really interesting finish to see how all of this shakes out. I think given who the 2 wildcard teams are likely going to be, you would really like one of Seattle or Winnipeg in the first round if you're really anybody. Just because I think that would kind of get you around where you could get your feet wet, get into it, get ramped up. If you pull Dallas, Minnesota, if you're in the Pacific Division, finishing that 2-3, again, I still would really like the Avs in either one of those series. But it's just you're jumping right into a much harder grind for round 1.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of uncertainty because it's split kind of with these 3 leaders in the Central. Mm-hmm. And I think tonight's going to be an interesting story just from Seattle and Minnesota playing tonight.
Yep.
Because Seattle's trying to crawl ahead in the Pacific.
Yep.
Minnesota's obviously trying to
hold on.
And this could help the Avs. Like, you were sort of rooting and willing for Seattle to defeat Minnesota and help to elevate them moving forward, just to give them a little bit more insurance, because it could really go a few different ways. Avs have a lot to course correct too in terms of how they've matched up with Dallas, and I think coming up later this week, that's going to be a really important game for them, as is the Minnesota game. I think those are always an exciting game. Like, people ask if there's a current rivalry, and I don't know that there's any one team that I point to having anything close to what was once the Detroit rivalry, but Minnesota and St. Louis have been teams that I have not enjoyed watching all that much when the Avs face them, and I think that's going to be interesting even without Kaprizov.
The Minnesota one feels like, and it should be Vegas. It's a shame that we've been robbed of like 3 Colorado Vegas series over the last few years that like should have been. But like Minnesota, Colorado feels like the only one that on both sides, like there are just still some like nasty feelings going back to that 2013 playoffs.
Yeah.
And then in the subsequent seasons since, like it just does feel like that is where there's the most kind of like dislike between players on the ice and fans. So no, that's going to be an interesting game. And then, like you said, the only thing that makes you think twice about Dallas if you're the Avs, those are just weird games. They're just weird games. It's not even like a matchup issue. It almost seems like both teams are uncomfortable, and it ends up in like weird, quirky outcomes. And so yeah, that's going to be a weird one. But just, you mentioned rivalries, and I know we're just about done, but like, I'm so excited that Arizona's in the Central Division, because those are the Avs and the Coyotes are 2 teams that seem to like weirdly hate each other for like no reason. There's just something that, like, the players don't get along, and it always ends up super physical, super chippy. And the games have, like, again, this has been the other thing that's weird, as dominant as the Avs have been over the last number of years, Arizona always plays them super tough. And so that's one that I'm anxious to keep my eye on as Arizona hopefully gets better and gets back into the playoff picture in the next couple of years. And we have had a playoff series between those 2 teams recently. I don't know. I think that could be a really fun rivalry in the making now that they're both in the same division.
No, I actually agree. Like, even thinking back to, I don't remember the exact time frame, but it definitely was early 2010s. There were those Arizona Colorado series were also kind of chippy.
When
like
Mike Smith was there?
Yes, this has been kind of a long-standing thing that's been building, even though the construction of these teams are pretty different now. I also look forward to then how these teams match up moving forward, especially as Arizona presumably gets better. Right.
You think I make a lot of jokes, but like genuinely, I have talked to some folks that think it's at this point without knowing what Toronto does in the playoffs, like it's a coin toss. If like Austin Matthews, I have been told like is very interested in going home to Arizona. They're obviously in lottery sweepstakes in a really deep draft this year. They already have some really high end prospects coming through the pipeline in Arizona. If they can get back into the playoff picture in the next 2 seasons, while the Avs are still at the height of their competitive window, I think you can end up with some really fun games that get a little nasty.
Well, speaking of really fun games, hopefully the Avs don't leave any points on the table tonight against Anaheim. It is the second leg of a back-to-back, and Jonas Johansson is likely getting the start in net. So there are some challenges that they face ahead of them tonight, but they're in this points race. Like they do need those points.
Yeah, you have to. We mentioned it before on the pregame show last night. You're in the final stretch here, the last dozen games. You have to win all of your like should win games. Anaheim is, I think they're the worst team in the West by a decent margin. It's them and the Sharks. You have to beat this team. I know you're on the second night of a back-to-back. It was a 1:00 game or noon Pacific time game yesterday. 7:00 for them tonight in California local time. There's really no reason for like the back-to-back argument. The Avs need to go out and get a win tonight. I'm at the point for the end of this season, like I don't care how the wins look. They just need the points.
Avs have done well in their back-to-backs, and they let Anaheim get away with one before the All-Star game break that I hope they can also get a little bit of justice for themselves.
Yeah.
But we'll be back with pre-game coverage, and honestly, in a few hours.
Not very long, yeah.
So we'll be back, though, with more written At the Rink content coming back again this week, and then more episodes to come as well. I'm Meghan Angley, Jesse Montano. This was DNVR Avalanche At the Rink podcast.